I guess Palsteron here, and today let's talk about Caustic Arrow Poison Ballista. So before we get going, a few disclaimers here. Number one, the idea for this build, Caustic Arrow hit-based with poison, comes from That's Real Nido on YouTube. I'll link his original video down in the description. Really cool idea. I wanted to test it out last league, but basically once I saw EA Ballista, I knew it would be very, very hard for this build to actually overtake it, and I was kind of right. EA Ballista is kind of busted, but we all know it's probably on the chopping block. So definitely check out his video as well. He played it in 3.15 Gauntlet. Number two, this is Leaguestart testing. This is not a full build guide. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a fortune teller. What's going to happen in 3.18, I just don't know. All we can do right now is kind of establish a baseline for the skill, know how it works, know how it functions, how it scales, how it feels to play, right? And once the patch notes come out, if anything changes, we can apply that to what we found out. So what that means is I'm going to do several builds. We're going to test them out. And whatever build I'm going to actually play for Leaguestart, I'm going to make a very detailed guide about it. But this is basically just going over what we found. And then we need to also talk about cost. So for this build, we used 2 exalted-ish investment. And this is Leaguestart investment. We're not bullshitting around with, oh, it's month 3 of the league. A 6-link costs 10 chaos. Nice. All right, let's do that. No, we're actually taking Leaguestart prices, right? And round about 2 exalted-ish. It's always hard to tell. But with this build in particular, we looked at not using too many uniques. For example, as you can see here, I actually wrote that here. We're not using Darkscorn, which right now costs like 4 chaos. So yeah, would be nice to use, right? But as we know, even though it's not expensive, it's very rare. So if a lot of people actually want to use the build, it will end up being several exalts. So in that case, I just wanted to go with a very, very bare bones version. And with this very bare bones version, we managed to do content up to Shaper Elder invitations. Everything after that, you're going to need a Darkscorn. We're going to talk about that in the video as well. You're going to need a Darkscorn, Cluster Jewel setup, Awakened Gems. I have a POB down in the description for that as well. Now, first, let's talk about Caustic Arrow and why I went for Ballistas. Now, you might be confused here. You might be like, Palsteron, did you not do your research? What are you talking about poison? Don't you understand how the dot works? But I want to make this clear at the very start. We do not scale the poison ground of this skill. So what you see here, this ground here, we're not scaling. That's why you won't see any plus levels on our bow. That's why you're just going to see straight up poison scaling. Now, most people, me actually included, before I watched Real Nido's video, actually thought that Caustic Arrow kind of only consisted of the caustic ground, right? But it doesn't. It actually has a hit portion. Now, if you look up there, it says attack damage, 63.9% of the base. What that means is that basically whatever base damage you would have, 63.9% of that base damage is being used for the attack. And that is basically the same explosion as you can see here, this green up top here. That doesn't really have anything to do with caustic ground. And you see that these are overlapping, like almost all of them, or basically all of them are overlapping. And that's important because while 63% might not seem like much, right? You can basically overlap as many projectiles as you want. In this build, we get up to 7. So if we do the math, if we have 7 times 63.9, we get up to a base damage of 447.3%. And we tested this in PvP, and these do actually overlap 7 times against big hitbox enemies. Against some other enemies that are a little more slimmer, they hit up to 5 to 6 times. But against the enemies where you actually needed, all of those projectiles actually do overlap. So once again, I want to make clear about the ground, right? The dot ground. We do not scale this dot ground. It scales a little bit because we have like chaos damage over time multiplier, which we want anyways for the poison, but all the poison stuff does nothing for it. So do not think about that at all. And number 2, all the ballistas will put down a lot of caustic ground. These do not overlap. So that's why we cannot really scale the caustic ground at all. We just completely forego it. All we care about is these explosions right here. As for scaling, just to drive this home another time, because this is one of the biggest things that people do wrong, poison builds want base damage. Now, the times I've seen people do Quill Rain with a poison skill is too damn high, all right? If you want a early bow, you go for Death's Harp, right? That's all you need. You go for Death's Harp. It doesn't look very good, but at least it has base damage, not like Quill Rain. Quill Rain is absolutely dog shit for this build. Just want to point this out right now. You actually want base damage. Now, the second thing we're doing in this build that's maybe a little bit more intricate is we're using Master Surgeon to actually get a lot of sustain. Now, this is a little interaction that a lot of people have been using over the last few patches. I'm just going to explain it in case you haven't seen it yet. So basically, Master Surgeon has a line here down below, recover 6% of life when you use a flask. And basically, you don't have to use it by hand. You can also trigger it, for example, with stuff like used when charges reach full. So what happens is that whenever you get hit, right, your flasks are going to go up. So for example, let's say you have a quartz flask here, or yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's say you have a quartz flask here and you get, it basically automatically activates, right? So you go from 60 to 30 flash charges. And then when you get hit 3 times, because this does scale with increased flash charges gained, it will shoot up to full again, and it will deplete its flask again, giving you this 6% of life when you use a flask. And this is just one flask, right? We have 4, so these actually stack for how many flasks you have. So basically what happens is if you get a lot of rapid hits, you just go up immediately. It goes like this, right? And that's pretty damn cool because totem builds don't really have a good way to sustain usually. So this basically solves a problem for totem builds that is pretty huge, which is sustain. And what you also can do is you can actually scale the 7 charges gained when you hit with increased flash charges gained. In this case, I'm just going to tell you right away, you can actually do crazy things with this, right? Because, for example, if you block a hit, you still get hit. You just don't take any damage. Same with stuff like elusive, right? You just avoid the damage, but you still get hit. You can do crazy things with that because you don't take damage, but you still get all your charges back. But the thing is, in this build, we don't really make use of that. We don't really have a lot of block scaling. We could go rear guard, but usually just, it doesn't really matter. This interaction is not at its craziest for this build, but it's still good enough since we want to go Pathfinder anyways. This is not a whole reason why we go Pathfinder. This is just a cute interaction to put on top. As for defenses, we actually went for a ton of armor with iron reflexes. Now, I might be confused why we go iron reflexes because hybrid evasion armor is actually a lot better in a lot of cases because you don't have any block, right? You have 0 avoidance. So just getting a little bit of evasion can mean that only half of the hits actually connect with you. The thing is, we actually want to get hit, right? Because of the way these flasks interact with the Pathfinder Ascendancy. So if we had block, for example, that would be easily fixed because block means we still get hit, but we don't take any damage. But with evasion, you don't get hit at all. So you don't get your flash charges back. So it doesn't really make any sense to go for it. You just want to go for iron reflexes, honestly, because that will at least give you a ton of armor. Now, that being said, you can definitely also go for a jade flask. Right now, we're only running a granite, and that's basically because I have like very scuffed gear right now, right? But if I put this down, I have like 27k armor. And with Molten Shell, that is a pretty good defensive layer. On top, we get to like 5k life, right? We have the Molten Shell. We also have spell suppression, right? So this is another thing that's pretty damn important with 93%. And with the Quartz Flask, which is going to be always up because of Pathfinder, we're going to have 100% spell suppression. Now, something I want to mention here is that the Pathfinder interaction helps you a lot in terms of, we talked about defenses, but talking about sustain, until you get Master Surgeon, you're probably going to have to deal with something like a Vitality, or honestly, just going for a second Life Flask instead of the Sulfur Flask, for example, right? Because sustain is going to be a little bit awkward. But after you have Master Surgeon, that's definitely a thing to do. Now, in order to show you how this build actually plays, I'm going to show you a Phoenix, Forge of the Phoenix right here. And basically with this gear, with this bare bones gear, which we're going to talk about in a second, the gem setup, whatever, you can see this is very much like day 1, day 2 situation. We don't have our good gear yet. This is like roundabout 2 exalted-ish, maybe like 2.5 depending. And basically, I'm just going to show you what it can do on this. Basically, the highest content we did on this was like, I think Elder and Shaper Invitations. Yeah, was the highest one. If you want to do higher, you'll need Darkscorn. You'll just need more damage. It's very, very easy to actually double or even triple your damage. We're going to talk about that in the second half. But basically, this is just here to show you how we play. So we have a Malevolence on Life Tap and Divine Blessing. So whenever we press that, we lose some HP. But we get Malevolence for basically free, right? Then we have, as for auras, we have Grace, Herald of Agony, Determination, Defiance Banner, right? Now, as for what we cost ourselves, basically we have Flame Dash here. You can always go Withering Step if you really want to. I just really, really like Flame Dash. Then Caustic Arrow, that's our main ballista, right? We have up to 5 maximum ballistas, and we're actually self-casting Frenzy, and we have a focus to press whenever we need to get some ailment duration. But let's just quickly go through this real quick. So this is basically how it plays like. As you can see here, in T16 maps, the damage isn't like crazy, but like scaling this kind of damage is just really, really easy. And I want to do the very bare bones. So this is basically how you go through. This is your kind of playstyle. You just place your totems, move, move, move. You might have seen here that we actually don't really have any evasion And that's for a very specific reason. That's for the reason that we actually have the Flask Finder interaction, the Pathfinder interaction that I talked about earlier. We don't want any evasion because then we don't get hit and we don't get the extra flash charges to sustain. So you might have seen that we actually do get hit from time to time, but we shoot up to full immediately. And that is because of the Pathfinder interaction. If you haven't watched the mechanics section, definitely do so. So we just walled through here. Basically everything is going to be very, very easy to do. And we're just going to skip to the boss real quickly because this is where you're going to see where the problem lies with having super budget gear. Basically, at this point, we just don't have enough damage, right? So I didn't really do much malevolence at all, but we're going to press it right now. So here we got hit a little bit, but yeah, let's go into this here. Let's do Q. Let's do F2. Gonna put them down. Do the frenzy. All right. We have Maven here, which is a little bit annoying. And as you can see here, the damage isn't like crazy, but it is more than enough for what we're trying to do right now. So if you get this character like a few exalts more, like Darkscorn, Sin's Rebirth, Awakened Gems, right? You're looking at probably like 2 to 3 times the damage that you see right here. And as you can see here, it is a very, very cozy playstyle, even though we are actually quite tanky with quite a bit of armor, quite a bit of defenses. Actually, are we gonna die here? No, we're fine. Okay. So this is with Maven on top. Now, if you want to do stuff, we actually did this on stream. If you want to do stuff like Guardian's Aid, you can, but it's going to be a little bit questionable on 2 exalts. But then again, if you're up here, if you pathed all the way up here, my question would be, how can you not have at least 2 exalts, right? In whatever, right? You just sell your stuff. But yeah, basically this is how the build plays. All right, so our Ascendancy is, we're Pathfinder, right? So we're using Master Toxicist for the Poison Prolif. Now don't think about this too much because Poison Prolif actually kind of sucks. It is a lot worse than Ignite Prolif, and the reason for that is only the biggest poison actually gets prolifed, and not all of them, right? And poison is all about stacking. So whereas with Ignite, you just have one big hit, and that's going to get prolifed. With this, only your biggest hit is going to get prolifed, and since we're ballistas, right, there's not much there. So this is not really just for the prolif, it's more also for the 20% more damage, and the prolif is just a little bit a nice finish on top, right? And then we have 15% more chaos damage with attack skills. Counts for us. We also have 30% AoE, which gives us more overlaps. Very, very nice. The Fizz to Chaos conversion doesn't do anything. Then we go Nature's Adrenaline. It's just 15% move speed, 20% attack speed. Just very, very solid. Makes the build feel a lot better. And then at the end, we have the Master Surgeon, which is for the interaction with Flagellant's Flasks, right? They recover 6% of life when you use a flask. Just to make sure, you know, gain a flask when you deal a crit strike. If your ballistas crit, you don't get those, right? So it's really only for the last part, but it's also, the first 2 are also nice because now you don't have to get bleed remove anywhere. Now to quickly go over the items, we're using a Lionized Glare. Now this bow is absolute dog shit for what we want. I just want to clear that up right away. This bow is really, really, really bad. The reason I'm using it is because I want to make a point with this build. This build is very, very cheap. You don't need much damage from your gear. It has very good scaling. This is a very, very mediocre bow that you can easily do better with. For example, in the exact POB that I have right now, I don't know, it's going to change, but I saw like 70 to 80% more damage with Darkscorn. On top of that, you also get the 25% of Fizz taken as Chaos, which can give you even more defenses against physical hits. But basically, what I'm trying to say here is this is a super cheap bow that is very, very easily accessible. Do not go for Krill Rain. Krill Rain is completely garbage for this build. We actually ran with this bow here, Death's Harp, for I think up to level 66. This is a level 32 bow, and we just put it on and it did everything we needed it to do, right? So always think about that. We're not scaling levels, we're scaling Fizz-based damage. One more thing about Lionized Glare is in this version, we're actually not scaling accuracy because we don't need to. Hits can't be evaded, right? So that's a cool upside, but it's not actually that big of a deal because bow skills have a lot of like passive tree options for accuracy. And also something I want to notice is Far Shot doesn't work for this build because we're scaling poison damage. Far Shot is only for attack damage, projectile attack hits, right? So it doesn't work for hits, it doesn't work for our poisons. So that's why this bow is just very, very mediocre overall. It's just kind of there because it's super cheap. Now, something really, really nice about Caustic Arrow is that you actually do not need Withering Touch support, as you can see here. So we actually want Wither, of course, and we can't really go for Spell Totem because that takes one of our totem slots, right? So basically what we do is there's two options. Number one, you go for the Helm enchant that gives Caustic Arrow a chance to inflict Withered for 2-second base duration, or you go for Anomalous Caustic Arrow, which gives you exactly the same, right? Don't go for both, you don't need it, but basically the better one would definitely be the gem, right? Because all you lose is like 10% AoE, which is nothing. But as for Helm enchant, there are other juicy ones, like for example 40% increased damage, or stuff like Blood Rage attack speed. I want to just make clear how huge this actually is. It means you don't have to use Withering Touch support, basically opening up another support gem. That is what it has over skills like Tornado Shot or Scourge Arrow. Also, the reason you see me not going with Anomalous Caustic Arrow and going for the Helm enchant is because the Helm enchant is going to be a lot easier to get at Leaguestart, because the heist farmers need time to grind all the gems, and gems are also usually harder to get, right? So what we did with this helmet is basically we just slammed a few Essences of Greed, right, for the life. And what you want is you want to have a suffix open for the increased duration of ailments you inflict while focused. Focus is basically just a cooldown placeholder. Whenever you press it, you get what's on your gear that it says it gets, right? So for example, if I didn't have this mod here, I wouldn't have focus on my bar. But as soon as I have the mod, I focus on my bar and it does only this, right? If I got other sources of focus does this, focus does that, the focus skill kind of morphs to that. For boots, all we did is basically get a little bit of movement speed, a little bit of life. I would assume these at Leaguestart cost like 3-ish chaos or something. Obviously, you would want more movement speed, you would want more life, right? But this is how we do it. As for heavy belt, we just bought a cheap one with some flash charges gained. We have a little bit of strength and intelligence fixed on here. We have T1 life, which is nice. We actually do need the strength, I think, so definitely look out for that. As for Emmy, we went for a little bit of life, a little bit of res, and then a little bit of dot multi. This is like T3, I think, T4. I don't really remember. T4, yeah. So nothing really interesting there. Something interesting, though, is you want a lot of added chaos damage, right? So, for example, we got it on 2 of our rings. Here we can't get it because we didn't get the life roll. But if you look at this gear, TLDR, it's just kind of dog shit gear, right? The gloves, you would really, really want attack speed where we didn't get it. Or it would have been unrealistic, let's put it that way. So we have a lot of res, right? We have spell suppress. So this is basically something that goes throughout the whole gear. You want 100% spell suppress, and you can't really do that if you put too many good stats on your gear, right? For example, if you also wanted to have attack speed here, you would have to get the res somewhere else. Basically, you're increasing the cost of your gear. So we kind of just went for very bare bones gear, but we did look that we actually got to the 100% spell suppression. This is without the flask, right? With the flask, we're at 100%. As for where the cost actually comes from, one of the things is the body armor, right? So this is basically just we basically took a bad base, right? So nothing good like an astral plate or anything, or like a commander's brigandine, I think is the best one for evasion armor. We took a full scale armor, right? It's like whatever. Basically you want a 6-link that you can craft on, right? So non-corrupted. And basically the colors are pretty easy. It's 2 blue, 2 red, 2 green, right? We're going to talk about that. Basically what we did is we hit a few Screaming Essences of Greed until we hit the spell suppress. We actually didn't need T2 spell suppress. We could have also done with T3. So just look for that. Also, if you need more spell suppress, you can even go as far as anoint more spell suppress, right? There's also a lot of spell suppress here, so it's not like it's necessary to hit it, but it is very nice to shore up a little bit of the passive tree. As for flasks, we already talked about it. You want flagellants on every single one of your flasks. Now we rolled alterations. This is where more of the cost comes from, right? Alterations at Leaguestart are around about 10 to 15 for a chaos, right? So we spent round about 400 alterations in total to make these flasks. This is also why the suffixes are absolutely dog shit, right? Increased block and stun recovery. I would want attack speed. I would want armor. I would want evasion, all of those, but we don't have it, right? So we're only focusing on a prefix here. So this one has movement speed, which is okay. It's like T2 movement speed. This one has reduced effective curses, which is like okay-ish. I think it's T4, yeah. And then we also have chance to avoid frozen. Chill doesn't do basically anything, right? But we're looking for, so the sulfur flask you can definitely replace with a jade flask. I kind of felt like we were good enough, and one of the problems with this build is we don't really have space for a cluster jewel, right? So I needed a little bit more increased damage, so that's why the Sulfur Flask is there. The regen can also be nice against dots. Then we have a Granite Flask, which is very, very good for your armor. We have a Quicksilver Flask just to be faster, and definitely a no-brainer in every single ballista or totem build is the Quartz Flask, which gives you phasing. Now, the Life Flask is really only here against bosses. You don't really need a Life Flask. If you're just mapping, you're basically going to go up to full anyways with the Flagellant's interaction. But basically, the Life Flask is just very, very nice against bosses. Against bosses, you get hit a lot less, but you get hit harder, right? So you actually need to fill up your HP, so that's where the Life Flask is for. And also against dots, sometimes it can be nice to just have a slow Life Flask, but basically, if you can get a better one, or if you feel comfortable without it, try it out. It's totally fine. As for gem setups, we're going Caustic Arrow, and we're going Caustic Arrow with Unbound Ailments, Ballista Totem Support, Life Tap, Greater Volley, and added chaos damage. Now, important here is that it's Greater Volley, and the reason Greater Volley, as I already pointed out in the intro, is because you want a straight line here. This is going to give you all the overlaps you need. With GMP, it would be more of a spray, right? So it wouldn't go like straight in a line. That's very important. Also important is a Life Tap is just there for quality of life, right? You can reserve a lot more of your mana. It just goes a lot more smoothly, right? So as you can see here, without Life Tap, with another support, this would cost like, I don't know, 40-ish mana, right? So 40-ish mana, that's pretty hard to do with how little we have. We also don't have any mana regen. So yeah, you could get a little bit more damage if you fixed your mana, but then again, if you play around in PoB, you will quickly notice that that is actually less damage than if you just slap on Life Tap, and if you forget about it, it's a very cozy playstyle. As for other setups, we have a Hex Touch and Despair setup. If you can afford it, you can definitely go for a Despair Ring, right? It's really nice. But what we're doing right now is we're doing Hex Touch, Despair on our Frenzy. So the Frenzy is basically the one that we're casting throughout the map, and this is basically just to get Frenzy charges. That's all it is. But it also does apply your Despair. Then as for our Divine Blessing, this is once again the aura that we press, right? This is going to be Malevolence with Divine Blessing, Increased Duration, and Life Tap. This is basically a free aura. And then as for our main auras, we just have them somewhere here. So we have Determination, we have Herald of Agony, we have Defiance Banner, we have Grace, right? All the goodies for your defense. Herald of Agony is basically just there to give you a little bit more chance to poison. One thing I want to mention is that you obviously would want Divergent Herald of Agony. That gives you even more chance to poison. In the version we're currently running, you don't really need to, but I'm sure you could leverage it somehow. Then we also have Molten Shell on our left click. Now, you don't have to do Molten Shell on left click. Some people like it, some people don't. You can also do it cast when damage taken. And we have it with increased duration right here. And I think we have like, yeah, we have the random Blood Rage thrown in there. Just to point that out, Blood Rage is kind of annoying to play with because we don't really have much regen, right? So I don't know if it's actually worth it. You get Frenzy charges anyways from your Frenzy. And then we also have the Flame Dash there to round it out. Also, something I forgot going into passive skill tree. Rain of Splinters is really huge for this build. And this is a little bit more currency investment that we have into the build. Basically, it's just huge, right? It is single target. It is clear. They all overlap. It's huge. Now, one thing I want to mention is that at the Leaguestart, this can get expensive if stuff like, for example, EA Ballista, right, gets popular. But the thing is that you can just buy any role, number one, right? Divines at Leaguestart, don't forget, Divines at Leaguestart cost like 3 to 4 chaos. So just slam on 1 or 2 and you get a little bit of extra damage because you reduce your reduced damage, right? But number 2, this is not really that important. We played up to like level 80, 82 without it, but it is very nice to have. Now, as for the passive tree, all right, so this is basically the passive tree that you're going to have until you get a cluster jewel. I will include another POB down in the description with Darkscorn with the cluster jewel with like awakened gems to kind of upgrade it a little bit, right? So at the start, we're pathing normally through here. I don't think it's actually worth just cutting through here, cutting through these dex nodes. Overall, you actually get quite some good things like a lot of life, evasion. What I will say is if you have Darkscorn and you actually need accuracy because you don't have the hits can't be evaded anymore, you can path through here. You don't get the attack damage, but you get like a little bit of accuracy and attack speed. and these nodes aren't too good anyways, right? You go through the spell suppress. Very important, which I get asked a lot, is why do you take the claw nodes? The claw nodes are basically just there for the claw mastery, which says enemies poisoned by you cannot deal critical strikes, which is huge, right? So you can basically just roll as much crit on enemies as you want. They can't harm you. It also, the 10 damage over time multiplier for poison is not just for claws, as well as that the poison duration is not just for claws, and the chance to poison on hit also goes for this build. And we're basically just taking this to fix our poison chance, right? You could definitely go for another 3% recover life on kill, right? Which does actually work with your totems, because your totems kill with damage over time. You get the kill credit, right? But we already have 2%, so it kind of felt like that was enough already. But if you feel like it, certainly do so. We're just taking some life up here, some accuracy. This wheel is pretty damn good. You get a little bit of AoE right here. You get the 30 damage over time. You get like faster ailments, which is always really, really good. We take the 20% AoE for while wielding a bow, which is going to give you more overlaps, which is cute. Once again, if you have a Darkscorn, you will need accuracy. So on the second bow mastery, you want the 100 accuracy rating per green socket on equipped bow, and then you basically want to maneuver your gems in a way where you can get away with as many green sockets as possible in your bow, which is possible because you can have your main skill in your body armor. Down here we have iron reflexes. I already talked about this in the defense section. It's because with the flagellants, we actually want to get hit, right? These actually incentivize us to get hit to recover our HP back. Evasion is still nice, and if you don't have these flasks yet, if you don't have the charges when you're hit, you probably don't want the iron reflexes. You want the iron reflexes as soon as you have these flasks set up. This cluster here is just insane, right? Surveillance is insane. The extra totem is insane from Panopticon. And Ironwood is definitely necessary for your totems to survive later. Now, you might say, well, we can just re-summon them quicker, right? But whenever you're re-summoning, you're actually standing still and you're making yourself vulnerable against enemy hits. So them having a little bit of HP is actually pretty nice. Also, I mean, it gives you 150 armor per summoned totem. With 5 totems, that's like straight up like 800 armor or something, right? So yeah, then we go up here, we have Master Fletcher. Now this region here is basically the kind of like way we path if we don't have a cluster jewel. Obviously, once again, I'll have a POB of the cluster jewel setup as well, but we would want a cluster jewel. And then we're basically cutting all the shadow area. The shadow area is very nice because poison builds have problems getting increased damage. That's why cluster jewels are usually so good, right? So they have actually quite a bit of like attack speed, damage over time multiplier. It's pretty easy to get, but in terms of increased damage, not that easy ever since they reworked the passive tree. Very important here, you want Hunter's Gambit. Now, not all versions of this build need the Grace Mono Reservation, so if you don't need it, maybe take like the 10% movement speed if you haven't been hit recently, which is cute. Or like, yeah, no, that would probably be the choice. And you definitely want Charisma. I know it seems like bad pathing, but that just is what it is. Charisma is too strong not to do. Your reservation comes from this wheel and then the mastery that gives you 15% increased reservation. Now, next up, let's talk about Darkscorn. So Darkscorn is a unique that's usually very inexpensive, but if there's a content creator out there that makes a build guide and the build guide pops off, the problem with Darkscorn is it's actually quite rare. And this is important to mention because I want to make a distinction between rarity and cost, right? Just because something is rare doesn't mean that a lot of people want it. Now, the reason why it's like 2 to 4C right now versus maybe like 5x at Leaguestart if a build with Darkscorn pops off is that there is not much out there, right? So if there's like 30 Darkscorns in the first few days and there's like 1,000 players who want it, that's going to shoot up prices quite a bit, right? So that's why even though Darkscorn, you can now test it right now, they cost like fucking 3 chaos, 4 chaos. They're really, really easy to get. If a big content creator puts out a video, for example, and the prices shoot up, flippers are gonna get involved, right? You know the drill. So that's why I have a separate section here for Darkscorn, because once you have Darkscorn, your build has to change a little bit. And with changing, I mean for the better, actually, obviously. Because Darkscorn almost doubles your damage versus a Lionized Glare. It has a few distinct things that it does, right? Like, for example, Lionized Glare gives you hits can't be evaded, right? So once you put on Darkscorn, you now actually need accuracy. This is not actually that hard to do. What you most likely will do is you will respec the whole shadow area, and what you will do is you will, number one, go for Farsight, right? Then you will go for the accuracy per green socket on your equipped bow, right? And then maybe like put in a position if you have a little bit of mana left, and you're good to go. Maybe you're going to need like, I don't know, 1 roll on your rings. Now, the reason Chaos Res is important is because Darkscorn right here says 25% of physical damage from hits taken as Chaos damage. What that means is basically if you have a lot of chaos res, you actually get straight up physical damage reduction, right? It's different, obviously, because it's conversion. But basically, this comes out to around about 18% less physical damage taken if you have capped chaos res. Now, when it comes to chaos res, once again, Death's Rush helps out a lot. There isn't really too much other things you want to do. You can maybe go up here and go wasting, but the problem is damage over time multiplier isn't even that good. I guess you can also get 17% chaos res from this mastery here, but you would probably prefer just the withered effect, right, and get it elsewhere. You can get chaos res here. All in all, you don't really want to get chaos res from a passive tree. You want to get it from gear. So you're probably going to need Death Rush ring and then like 2 rolls somewhere, right? You can also work with essences to make that a lot easier. You don't have to have capped chaos res, just to point that out, but you definitely want to be like 50 plus. Now, down in the description, I'm going to link a Darkscorn version of this build. Just to be clear, these are the same items that I used in the video. Super cheap items. All I did was add a Darkscorn. I added a cluster setup, so a large cluster, a medium cluster to get some onslaught, to get some hinder. And then what I did also is I got awakened unbound ailments and awakened added chaos damage. Just with those upgrades alone, you're going to round about double your damage. Now, to make that happen, we had to basically sacrifice the assassin region right here. So we have a little bit less HP, and we also went for the far side right here to get the accuracy going, because now we don't have the hits can't be evaded from the Lionized Glare anymore, right? So we had to take this and also the mastery that gives us accuracy rating, Bergerine socket. As for leveling, I'll quickly go over some tips, but basically, if I league start this, I will make a comprehensive build guide. Now, what you do here is you just go through. So number one, you're going to use Caustic Arrow from level 1, right? And once you are at level 12, you can actually use Poison's Concoction. You path through these nodes, you go here, and basically all you care about is getting up here into this region. And the reason for that is you don't really have much increased damage at the start. Projectile damage here is nice and all, but it doesn't scale your poison. So what you're going to be looking for as fast as possible is chance to poison and increased damage that counts for your poison, right? And for your initial hit. So you go through quick steps, you go intuition. These you're going to do later. You want to path down here, take swift venoms for some attack speed, and then you want to rush up here to fail toxin as fast as possible. Now, if you want to run Toxic Grain, I've actually leveled with Toxic Grain, and I'm going to say in the league start scenario, it doesn't feel as good as it used to. But you can still do it if you want to. I really, really like Poison's Concoction for this. And you want to be in this region as fast as possible. Take all the increased damage here, take all the increased damage here, and then you're going to be fine. So now the question is, when do you actually want to respec into Caustic Arrow? And the answer is round about level 36, 32, whatever, right? So basically, Skirmish is extremely, extremely strong. Definitely before you respec, you want these notes here. Watchtower is extremely strong. The 5th totem you're going to get a little bit later, but that's whatever. As for early, you want a Death's Harp as soon as you can get it. They usually cost 1 alchemy to 1 chaos, depending on how much they are wanted. And same with Skirmish. Skirmish can go up to 2 chaos if you're unlucky. So it just depends on what you find. You don't need Death's Harp. Just make sure that you have physical damage on your bow. You don't want to go for any level scaling or anything like that. Skirmish is just GG until you get a decent Vile Arrow Quiver. So once you have these two, it's going to be pretty damn easy. And as you can see here, there's nothing really fancy going on. At level 66, you would really, really want a Lionized Glare. But overall, what's the conclusion? What's the verdict on this build? I would say number one, it very much revolves around the price of Darkscorn, which I just cannot know at this point. Now, the build is solid without Darkscorn. We've done everything up to Shaper and Elder Invitations, and it was very solid up to that point. But if you want to do higher tier content, if you want to do Maven, if you want to do Feared, you will need that Darkscorn, and you will need to upgrade your gear a little bit further. So if I had to compare it to something like Explosive Arrow Ballista, since this is a very, very similar playstyle, I would say this build is a lot more fun to play because it doesn't have as much delay. It also does not have Prolift though, so it kind of evens out. But in terms of damage, I will say that without Darkscorn, this can't really hold a candle to it. With Darkscorn, it becomes kind of close. Then again, it might not even have to compare to Explosive Arrow Ballista because it might get nerfed. We don't know. I'm definitely going to make an update video, like I said. But overall, I was very, very happy with how the build went. Some more tips in case you want to pick up the build. Don't delay your spell suppression too much. This was definitely something that I did feel I did a little bit wrong. On the Explosive Arrow Ballista, for example, I knew to get spell suppression at around about 80, 85, you want to get spell suppress before you enter red maps. Otherwise, it's going to get a little bit dicey at points. And also, once again, a reminder that this is a poison build, and you want to scale fizz and chaos damage like you would want, for example, for a fizz hit build. You don't want to scale levels. This is not Toxic Rain, and we're not scaling the Caustic route. Oh yeah, also something I forgot, Scourge Arrow and Tornado Shot are possible. The thing I did not personally like about Scourge Arrow is the delay, right? Kinda. Scourge Arrow does have better, I don't know, screen wide clear, but there's just kind of a delay. It's kind of like a even worse explosive arrow in that sense. So yeah, I didn't really love the playstyle. I felt like on Totems, which have less attack speed, it just doesn't really fit, but that might just be me. Scourge Arrow does have the advantage that you get flat damage, which at the start, if you have a bad bow, can help out a lot. And Tornado Shot just kind of feels like it needs the Helm enchant, so it was a little bit weird, especially now that Tornado Shot is back in the meta. Might be hard to get, but Tornado Shot is also definitely an option. You will need way better gear than, for example, for the Caustic Arrow version though. So overall, definitely keep your eyes open. I will probably not Leaguestart this, but the only reason is I would probably destroy Darkscorn prices and I would get torn to pieces, right? So I don't really want to do that. If you're just a player, I would definitely look out if there's people who, I don't know, promote Darkscorn. If it is, it might get a little bit dicey because it's a very rare bow. But if not, you could have one of the best Leaguestart you've ever had with this build. Just saying. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and see you next time. But that's it for the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe. As always, a huge shout out to my Twitch subscribers and my Patreons. I couldn't do stuff like this without you. Thank you so much for the support. And yeah, very fun build. Basically, I wanted to try this out because if EA Ballista gets nerfed, I'm a Ballista boy. I want to look at my options, right? So in that case, definitely look out for this build. As I said, I will make more and more of these Leaguestart testing videos. I'm having a lot of fun testing out some stuff. We might have some Incinerate Totems or Hex Blast or whatever brewing. We're trying it out right now. Even if we fail, I'm probably going to make a video about it just to tell you how dog shit it is. But yeah, with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.